welcome to the stream. I am BenB, the community manager for Hell Let Loose, and I'm excited to share with you not only a Q&A with some of our amazing developers, but also our first look at our deep dive trailer, as well as the reveal about when Tobruk is coming. I can't really say too much more. Let's just show you the video. I'll be back in a bit.
Peggy 16.
Tobruk, a name etched into the records of World War II, a fortress city shaped by centuries of conquest. Now caught in the storm of war, we joined the battle in 1942, with the British forces having established their defensive positions, while the German forces pushed to retake control of their once lost strategic military base. As we venture into the heart of Tobruk, we come across the iconic Church of Tobruk. The building is fully accessible, including the spire, to retain that Hell Let Loose gameplay that appears on other maps. This location, known as the Church Grounds, is our most central capture point, and it has its own custom variant that has been set up for control skirmish. Moving west, we have an area that contributes to the dense urban district, Albergo Ristorante Moderno. Remember to look up if you're at street level, as players are able to use accessible rooftops to gain a high ground advantage, traversing the city via connecting planks. This unique capture point provides players with a new fighting experience to Hell Let Loose. Into the north and out of the urban environments, we come across an area that provides players with a new gameplay experience, the Desert Rat Caves. As the name suggests, this area will allow players to participate close-quarter battles within a small cave system. Featuring varied elevations, the caves allow for close-quarters combat without restricting vehicle access. Players will be able to walk and climb into the caves, offering flanking abilities and other strategies to tactically advance. This location, along with others, highlights our design philosophy. By making every capture point feel unique in tone, we ensure the gameplay experience for players is prioritized, while still paying homage to the historical setting of the war. Far in the west in German territory, we find a desolate wasteland known as the Tank Graveyard. This build-up of destroyed tanks is the result of a previous German armoured assault attempt on Tobruk, which ended in defeat. From dead tanks and large craters to clouds of smoke and exposed rock formations, players have a variety of cover options to aid their advance. Moving deep into British territory, we find the road to Sanusi Mine. This area features a long, open desert road, with plenty of verticality from the watchtower, large sand mounds, rock formations, and tunnels. The capture point tells the story of how the British Army used minecarts to transport supplies efficiently across the harsh desert. During development, the art and programming teams collaborated closely to improve the weather system. This updated system adds a layer of unpredictability to the weather patterns. The sandstorm features 4 distinct modes, beginning with a light flurry of dust and sand particles, escalating into a full-blown sandstorm. These moments contribute to an evolving battlefield, offering players an additional layer of dynamic cover. New tactics will arise as commanders use the sandstorm to launch counterplays or surprising attacks under the cover of the storm. Alongside the new map comes new DLC, which includes the addition of much requested facial hair. Scope out the competition as part of the long-range desert group, or battle for the city, decked up as the Western Desert Campaign Unit. You can join the battle yourself on April the 2nd, as we fight it out in warfare, offensive, and skirmish game modes, as the assault on Tobruk commences.
That is right, everybody. Tobruk will be launching next week with Update 17 on Wednesday. I am super excited to share this and to get into the game with everybody. I think the best people to speak to about this does have to be some of the developers. And we have got two of the favorites from last week. That is going to be Carl and Dan. Welcome back to the stream. And I'm sure that lots of people in the chat right now are very excited to see you both and to talk a little bit more about Tobruk.
Good afternoon, chat. Thanks for having us. And look what I brought with me. We've let him out of his basement. We've lit him up a bit. He's ready.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Yeah, it's my recent promotion to associate art director means I can afford to put a light on now.
Well, it's great to have you both here today and to talk through some of the questions and go a little bit more deeper into Tobruk and the design process. Obviously, with the two of you having the level design and the art design as well, it's going to be really great to hear a little bit more from you both about the designing and creation of this map. So without further ado, we are going to jump into our first question, and that is going to come from NYKD. And he asks, since the PTE, have you added any more additional assets to the inside of buildings?
Yes, cool. I can't see on the screen, but have you got the images showing? Do we know?
Yes, we do now. Sorry about that. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Yeah, okay. Sorry, I just can't see the screen. Yes. So the since the PTA, the art team worked really hard to get more variation and interest into the buildings. One of the big areas was the exterior of the buildings, for sure, but we did do some extra work on the interiors. The exterior textures were sort of, they were called out for being low detail, and we were a bit of a slave to the reference on that. So as you can hopefully see in the images, we've given that an extra layer of detail, put lots more colour variation in there. We've the textures have got more kind of like depth, more interest, and the ground's got like more scatter and all that stuff. As for the interiors, the reference photos of Tobruk show very sparse interiors, very little left in them apart from the military stuff, but we know that it needs more interest than that for the players. One of the issues we have is that we went a bit mad creating loads of different enterable buildings, over 50 unique interior spaces, and obviously that takes a lot of time for us to dress them up to the kind of the quality and interest that we want. So we kind of took a hit on that, really, because we wanted the variety for the gameplay, for the urban fighting. Intervals are really important to the community, so we made sure that we did absolutely loads of them, but then of course you got loads of them to actually set dress. I've done some, well, me and the team have done some extra detail passes on that we'll put out in a future update.
Amazing. Carl, is there anything regarding the design? I mean, obviously talking about this is obviously a reference to the PTE being a little bit sparse. I can see a few people asking, has the floating sandbag disappeared from the PTE? I'm pretty sure that will have gone.
That was my favourite bit. Remember?
we've got reference of that, you know. The sandbag about 20 miles up in the air. Absolutely. No, yeah.
The community named it straight away as well. The sky sandbag. I was like, oh, that was on me. It's my fault.
Happy to confirm the
Can't
sandbag. The sandbag is gone. Yes.
Well, I'm sure that it's going to be really exciting to see some of the inside of the buildings, obviously some of the external development that has been done as well. And what we're going to go on to next is a question from Solid, and it's going to be about garrisons. So with the upcoming Tobruk map, how do you approach the planning and design process to ensure that garrison placement feels natural and strategically meaningful, rather than just being placed in open fields? Are there any specific historical references or gameplay considerations that guide your decision making?
Yeah, absolutely. So definitely gameplay decisions go into this. We recognize that in Elsenborn that was quite tricky because obviously Elsenborn is quite open for the most part. If you look at the Google Earth, there's just absolutely nothing there. We did kind of take liberties with that in the name of gameplay. And garrisons were no exception to that, especially the pre-placed ones. But we have learned and recognized that that doesn't translate well to new maps. So for Tobruk specifically, I'll touch upon the pre-placed garrisons first. So the pre-placed garrisons in offensive mode, they go through a process in which we place them down first, relative to the nearest capture point that's going to be active. The QA team then test the distances from the garrison to the capture point, and then we iterate on that as necessary. And then we just adjust them as and when we need to. Sometimes they need to be pulled closer. Sometimes they need to be pulled further away. Now, this is all done towards the end of the map. So at this point, most of the map is developed. But sometimes we find that actually the pre-placed garrison isn't in a good spot that because there's no cover around it. So for Tobruk, the challenge was, there are some areas that are like quite open in terms of like desert plains. So what we do in that case is we cater to the garrison itself. So we'll place some pre-placed cover around it as well. So you'll notice when you play offensive mode that no matter which pre-placed garrison you spawn on, there'll always be that immediate cover to hide you from attacks. Now, with player-orientated garrisons, obviously that's a lot trickier to cater for because this is a game that players decide their own spawn points. But what we do in that situation is we rely on the way we build our transitional areas. So you may have heard in the past me talk about transitional areas. A transitional area is the spaces in between the capture points that you use to flank the different directions. So the transitional areas in between the capture points will be designed to accommodate where we think that players would naturally place garrisons. You'll notice in the Tobruk map, and I'll touch upon this a bit more in the next further down the line, that there's a prison that's been constructed. While it didn't make the cut as a capture point, it is a good place to put a garrison. And because of that, that's just one way we decide where we're going to put, where players can put garrisons, essentially. So we always design sections where we think players are going to attack from. So it does become a bit predictable in a sense, because if you see a compound northeast of the point, chances are players are going to put a garrison there. But we don't always rely on structures as well. So a map like Tobruk, it's got open plains, desert plains. So what we'll do in that situation, if there are no buildings, is we can sort of use the terrain to our advantage and create like little dips for players to dodge in and out of. So sometimes maybe they're good places to put garrisons as well. So you're not just relying on buildings all the time. So yeah, that's our considerations when it comes to garrisons.
I see here, looking through chat, question from Sam saying, so that cover will only be available in offensive? I'm assuming that's just the pre-placed garrisons you're referring to there.
So the cover that applies to the pre-placed garrisons, the cover will be there regardless of which mod you play. There aren't exclusive mod sections in the map. Yeah,
that's good to know. Do you have any dealings with garrisons yourself, Dan, within the art team?
Only to just sort of like set dress around them, give them a bit of life. We work really closely with LD level design. So when they hand it over, they just be like, right, this garrison's good to go. Make sure that you don't move our sightline blockers, and then we'll just like dress it up.
Yeah, well, one thing I can see, so Captain Jaffo has said, one thing I liked from the PC was placing the garrisons inside the caves. And I'm sure that there'll be many people who haven't played the PTE who are going to enjoy playing around those caves, I'm sure.
Yeah, the caves look great and they play really well.
They do. That was such a difficult point to attack. It's, players are going to have a lot of fun with that one, yeah.
Yeah, we played it a lot on our internal PTs, and it was just like, we're going to have to open up the back of the cave. It's just like, it's too overpowered when you could just get everything in there to make it a bit more exposed.
That's a point, actually. Yeah, originally those caves, you couldn't get through the other side of them. We stuck to the reference where there was a back wall to it. So there was only one way in and out of it. So yeah, we couldn't have that.
I can see somebody else, just sort of as we're on the topic of garrisons, just talking about the distances between garrisons in terms of how far you can place between them. Is there any thoughts in terms of changing that at all, or reversing it to the 150 as they mentioned?
So the garrisons can be pretty flexible. We do tend to test them based on their distance to the nearest capture point. So while 150 meters sounds like a good rule to have, it doesn't always work that well because the hard cap placement for the adjacent capture point may not lend well to that. So I would say we're probably not going to stick to a 150 meter rule purely because it restricts us a bit too much. But what we will do is we'll take on board any feedback. If there are any specific pre-placed garrisons that need adjusting, we can absolutely move them closer or further away as well. We'll get our QA teams to test the distances for both forces. That's what we normally do anyway.
Amazing. As we move on from the garrisons, we're going to be having a question here from the Fresh Baked Goods, who is going to ask a little bit more about the detail around design choices for the Tobruk map in terms of topography and strong points. Was there any thought behind making certain lanes, vantage points, sightlines, etc.?
Yeah, sure. So the topography for Tobruk, Dan actually captures that data himself for the most part right at the start. So the data is pretty accurate, I would say, Dan. Is it fair to say?
I didn't get to go to Tobruk. We like troll the internet and get hold of satellite data. So that gives us a very good starting point to give us all of the height information and all that, and that really helps us actually like fit where the map is in the world.
Yeah, absolutely. Obviously, it does require cleanup, and we do iterate and clean it up as we develop the map. So that's the first protocol when it comes to topography. When it comes to lanes and things like that, so we have a process that when we're concepting called district theming. And that's just a fancy way of saying this is what this area means. So this could be a capture point, for example, or it could be an entire region. So what I mean by that is the city itself is its own district theme, right? The caves to the north, that's its own district theme. And then once we've established those district themes, we then go in and think about the player lanes and channels and things like that. We think about the infantry routes, the vehicle routes, where those routes might intersect, where we'll get the most bang for our buck when those do intersect. We want to try and make those cool moments, but we also want to give the players the freedom to create their own cool moments. There's plenty of surprises out there, which is a lot of happy accidents as well, which is awesome to hear. This isn't talked about quite a lot in game dev, but a lot of things are happy accidents, and we should embrace that because they're brilliant. They provide magic moments that people remember. And then in terms of sightlines, so you might see we've got an image for that, Ben. One of the strongest sightlines in the map is pretty obviously going to be the church spire, which you can get to the top of. Now, obviously, that does provide quite a high advantage point because it also helps that it's not blown up in any way. So players might feel quite safe in there. But because it's so dominant, we need ways to address that, right? So we do use the weather to help with that. But we also want the players to deal with that as well. So if you've got an enemy holed up in there, you see that badly drawn screenshot there is that we've got areas of elevation where snipers could deal with anybody camped in there, or tanks could load a shell in there and just clear out a squad in there. So that's all the things that we consider. We do quite a bit of sightline testing as well across the map. So we get QA to look over our enterable buildings and just check the sightlines, make sure they're not too dominant. There will be some cases where we'll think, okay, this is a bit too dominant. What can we do? We'll address those sightlines on a case-by-case basis. But usually, more often than not, there are ways to deal with those sightlines. So we've just got to make sure that we try and balance it out in that respect. Hope that helps.
I think it's interesting to see lots of people in the chat here just talking about the map and the direction. It seems like I think people are just going to be really excited to get in and play. Somebody saying about how it's going to be good to, if you're in the sniper, be careful for the if you're in the tower, even on the church, be careful for those snipers, because obviously this image on screen is a great example of people can still see.
I had a nightmare, several play tests with that.
You think it'd be brilliant being up there, but you're just a bullet magnet. Everybody can see you across the map.
Perfect. Well, I know the next question is going to be one that people are going to be really excited to just hear a little bit about from you guys, which is how much of the map is historically accurate and what parts are created specifically for the game. This comes from Vastus Vane. I know that a lot of people ask questions every time that you make a map about how did you come about creating this map? Was it identically taken from what was there before, or have you used a bit of creative freedom to express yourselves and make the game flow in a specific way? It'd be great to hear from you both about this.
Yeah, sure. It's a combination of both, actually. So we do have references of the city. They're quite easy to find, quite a few. We got quite lucky. We also had some aerial photographs. Yeah, there's one of the Admiralty House. So the city itself was quite easy to recreate for the most part, but that doesn't always translate well to good gameplay, right? So we can do maps one-to-one, but we also often find that it creates choke points and design problems that we just want to try and avoid if we can. So we will rework streets as necessary on a minute scale. But for the most part, the city certainly is pretty historically accurate. For the rest of the map, it was pretty tricky to actually find anything out there other than what we know, in that it's mostly a flat desert plain. And those of you who've experienced the horror of El Alamein in places will know that doesn't always translate well to good gameplay either. So we needed to address that. So while the outside of the map, outside of the city, is made up for the most part, we do have references of events and features that took place in the general area. So like the caves to the north, they may not have been in those exact positions, but we thought they were a really cool idea for a capture point, and they made sense to be where they were in terms of the topography. So we got those references. Yeah, that's pretty cool with the Toilette sign there. They had a good sense of humor, didn't they, despite what was going on? Yeah, and this anti-tank trench here. So this isn't in the map. This was something that we tried. We did find a reference for it of this long stretch of anti-tank ditch. There you can see there in the bottom right of that image. That didn't work out well, unfortunately, purely because it was very close to the German HQ. So it was our players were finding it so difficult to leave it. So sometimes it does work, sometimes it doesn't. That's why we're happy to try things and just discard them if they don't work. But we try and stick to the reference as much as we need to, but we're also not afraid to use that old cliche that gameplay is king. Dan, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. So, as you've seen some pictures, we look at a lot of aerial photos and as much sort of World War II reference photography as we can actually manage to get a hold of. Thankfully, Tobruk, there's loads of really good stuff around. Really encourage everybody, if you've got any interest in the history of it, or you want to know how accurate we've managed to get it, look online for the pictures. You'll find the same reference pictures that we do. It's just like literally, World War II, Tobruk. And when we make the maps, we try and make it as accurate as possible. We make we take satellite images from recently, then actually overlay historical aerial photography on top of that, so that we can see, because roads don't change, they don't move. Buildings get bombed down and bombed out and remade, but the big major roads always stay in the same places. So we can use that for sort of calibrating everything to the modern satellite data that we've got. But then, like Carl said, outside of the town, it's flat desert as far as the eye can see. So any details, we might bring them in half a mile here and there just to sort of compact it to fit within our gameplay area for gameplay interest. But yeah.
Absolutely. So, let's say we have a question in the chat as well. How is the terrain for moving vehicles around? Can we drive through stones with tanks, etc.? Yes, you can. The terrain is... We do have dips in the terrain. When I say dips, we're not talking massive sand dunes that are difficult to traverse. We're talking about natural sort of prone height cover that's used in a natural way, so we don't have to rely on objects like random barrels that are out in the middle of nowhere kind of thing. We can just rely on the natural terrain. And how that translates to vehicles is it makes them quite easy to get up. I think for the most part, hell let loose vehicles are pretty forgiving when it comes to driving on the terrain. We acknowledge the problems with collision quite a lot, and you'll be happy to know that it's not going to happen where your truck is going to get stuck on a little pebble or anything egregious like that. So hopefully that helps.
I can see quite a few people in the chat currently messaging, including Vastus Vane and the Hypo Critter, just asking about showing off the photo reference boards to the community. And that's something that's definitely I'll look to bring as part of a sort of community dev brief after the release of Tobruk. I think in the patch notes, we'll obviously just be referring to what's going to be coming, but I'll definitely do a sort of historical deep dive if that's something that people are really interested in.
love to put something together. Yeah, we've got some. It's funny because when you're playing the map and you've got everything built as it's getting closer towards finishing, sometimes you're like, hang on, I recognise this area, and then you like dig through your old photos and you're like, it's uncanny when you look through houses into the distance and you see a sort of a gap in the hills opposite, and you're like, hang on a minute, I've seen that on the picture. Yeah, it's lovely.
And that reference board is so full it takes forever to load now.
Yeah,
that's a good indicator that we've got
references.
references.
Thousands of pictures.
Yeah, absolutely.
100%. I'll definitely be looking to get one of those, and Dan, I'll definitely hit you up about creating a nice little blog for the community. I'm sure they'll be really interested in that. As we do come on to our next question, and that is going to be regarding capture points. From the one and only Das Altberg, how do you choose capture points to fight over in terms of art and level design? He mentions here about the architecture of Tobruk being quite fascinating, with landmarks like the church, the prison, and the towers, as well as the Admiralty. Some of them feel like they could be their own hard point to fight over, such as the prison area, but many dislike hard caps that are near the front line. He's very interested just to hear a little bit more about your sort of process when it comes to the capture points.
Yeah, sure. So I've got two very boring images to show you, but they're important nevertheless. So the way strong points and capture points work in Hell Let Loose in our editor is we are beholden to a grid system currently. So you'll see on the image there, the old church CP there has to sit between E6 and G6. And it basically has to do that, because if we moved it too far in one direction, the game would literally break. It wouldn't work. So sorry, F6. Yeah. So with this one, we try and balance it perfectly in the center as often as we can to capture the elements of the point that we want to make. So the old church, for example, we renamed that to Church Grounds because we didn't want to actually capture the church itself. We just wanted to capture the overall theme of the area, which was the grounds. And that is a good example of how we try and balance it as much as we can. So we can't always do that, unfortunately. But you'll see that either side, because the map runs east to west, is that both sides will take equal amount of time to reach the center point. And then with the second image, it doesn't really show that well on stream for some reason. But nevertheless, Das Altberg raises a good point about the prison. It could have been its own capture point. Because it was really cool. Andrew did a great job blocking that out. I'd have loved to have had it as a capture point. But unfortunately, the way it sits in the grid, it doesn't quite work either way. So regardless of where we would put the circle for it, it wouldn't capture the amount of the prison that we'd love to have featured with it. So sometimes we are beholden to the code base with that. That's something we'd love to address in future. But yeah, as it stands, we do have to be quite finicky with where we put capture points. But in terms of like radius and things like that, it is quite flexible. So as long as the capture point circle sits within those 4 squares, it'll be fine. We just need to account for balance for both forces. But yeah, radius, you'll probably notice in the old legacy maps, the older maps, that the radiuses are quite small on some of them, the radii. Whereas our newer maps, we tend to raise the radius up because we want players in the heart of the action inside the capture point. Because we feel that that's where the best engagements come from when attacking and defending, right? So we want as many people in there as possible. Hope that helps. Anything from you, Dan?
Yeah, for sure. Tobruk's a fascinating place, and it's the town centre is really quite compact, but with lots of things, so we're a bit spoilt for choice for where to put the CPs. Some of them, like the Admiralty House, could be a map on its own, let alone a CP. There's so much going on, but from the art point of view, the big thing is to make sure that each of the CP looks as different as possible, and ideally that you can actually spot it from a distance without having to go to the map all the time. So we'll always try and get some like verticality in there, be it smoke plumes or radio towers, or just making the CP a particular building that's like a real standout, like landmark. It just makes it easier to play and just makes it more interesting.
Yeah, agreed. The Admiralty House, by the way, another difficult point. Such a high vantage point, you've just got to blast your way through. Speed and power.
It is a fun one to play around that. I love the ability that you can sort of climb on the different levels and stuff. It's it's a fun one to fight in for sure. I can see lots of people here talking about capture points. A lot of people feeling pretty happy that they're going to be having more centralized strong points and such. So no, it's good to see. Seeing if there's anybody else in chat talking about strong points at all. Is there anything you've noticed there, Carl?
There's a question from Sam_15_SVK referencing what I've said about the current confines of the grid system. You mean you could release yourselves from the confines of the grid system in the future sometime? Absolutely, that's something we want to try and do. We don't want to be restricted as designers, and we don't want you, the players, to be restricted in how you play the game. If we can unwrap that and solve that issue, absolutely.
Perfect. Next question, following on from capture points, it's just going to be a little bit more of a not necessarily a vague question, but why Tobruk and why 1942 specifically? This comes from both Nesso and then a follow-up question from T-Bone, which is, are there any other plans for more North American maps in the future?
Yeah, sure. So Tobruk, we picked 1942 specifically because we already had the British 8th Army and the DAK forces ready. We felt like those sort of forces needed expanding before we moved on to other factions. We do acknowledge that obviously the Australians were in the 41 campaign, and the New Zealand contributions should never be forgotten either. But we felt that this time around specifically, we needed to empower what was already there with the British 8th Army. So you guys already have El Alamein, which is, we fully acknowledge as a Marmite map. You either love it or despise it. But we needed to expand that even further. So that is why we chose 1942 for this particular one. Are there any other plans for more North African maps? There currently aren't, but I believe, Ben, you've got an image for us here. We do have plenty of banked content. So we've looked at places like Gazala. We've looked at other places as well in North Africa. Tobruk is very urban. Well, it's got a good urban distribution. There we've got the Kasserine Pass as well, which could be an interesting one. So we do have plenty of options if we were to revisit North Africa in the future. Nothing we do here gets wasted. If we've got a concept, we'll throw it in. We'll get it roughly planned out. And if the community really want it, we'll build it.
Yeah. Part of the choice of where we actually build the maps comes down to the art as well. It's mainly gameplay and things, but us and the artists will always just go like, we need a map that's got more verticality. The really big mountainous changes always play really well, so we always want to key off that kind of natural landscape stuff. Some of the battles, particularly like more tank battles, just big, wide, open, flat, very dull for artists.
Very difficult to balance as well.
Yeah.
I can imagine. But no, I love with this one here, obviously could have been that flat, but you've obviously added in that elevation, and certainly through playing it has been great to see, and great. I'm really excited to see what the community think about it, as it does launch on Wednesday next week. So I'm super excited about that.
When does it launch, Ben?
Oh, Wednesday next week. So yeah, they're extremely excited, and we're now going to be moving to one of the final questions in this Q&A, and it is going to be around the rooftops, which is, are the buildings going to have interior or accessible to set up on the roofs? Are there more rooftops going to be accessible in the future, maybe on other maps?
So to answer the first question, yes, you'll have probably seen in the trailer that we've just put out, there were soldiers fighting on and around rooftops. This actually stemmed from a original design problem, as it were, where we had one-story buildings that were non-enterable. We knew that players would be able to park trucks up and get on top of them to climb up unnaturally. We didn't want to stop that. We actually wanted to encourage it, right? So that's where the idea of rooftop fighting came from. So you see in the image there, we have it's cut off to the left, but you'll see that the two-story buildings have rooftop access from inside of them. Some of the enterable one-story buildings have rooftop access to them from the exterior via steps. So yes, you can fight on the rooftops. I've played it. It's very cool, very scary. There's some nice verticality going on, especially when you've got players underneath you lobbing grenades up. So what we did with this is we created a network. This is primarily in the Albergo Ristorante CP, where a lot of the rooftop fighting can take place. But we made sure that when you can access a rooftop, you're not cornered in case you've got enemies chasing after you. So there will always be a network for you to climb over. We didn't want it to be janky in the sense of having to sort of jump over rooftops to gain advantage to the next one. So we put these wooden planks down. We found references of soldiers actually doing this, of them being propped up by boxes, and that allowed them to carry boxes and crates from building to building. We lent into that with the design of the rooftops as well, because they obviously make very good cover spots.
Yeah, it was great fun to build. But like I said earlier, we went mad creating far too many variants of interiors. It's like in some of the much older sort of legacy maps, there's like 5 or 10 different interiors that are repeated a lot. We've got 50 odd, and it's great because it gives that variety. But of course, it's lots more work for the art team. But to answer some of the questions, we can't place OPs and Garys on the rooftops.
No, this is something that's been the bane of my existence for the last couple of years on Hell Let Loose. Is can we build inside? Can we not build inside? Some maps you can, some maps you can't. The stance we've taken ever since taking over is that, as per the newer maps, you cannot build inside or build on top of rooftops either. The rooftops one, we could change that if we need to. I think what we'll do is we'll get some feedback on that specifically, because we as a team were unsure. So what we did to start off with was stick to what we normally do and say, no, you can't build inside. That's a part of a building. But it is pretty easy for us to change. So we want to hear what the community thinks about that. We've never done rooftop fighting before either in Hell Let Loose, not officially anyway. So that's a new design for us to sort of take moving forward as well for potential future maps.
You can put MGs on the roof though.
You can.
The parapets around the edge.
You can,
MGs
yes.
everywhere.
Yes, that's scary as well when you get that crossfire going. That'll help towards the rework as well for the bipod. And yeah, you can mount up practically anywhere. Same with the Admiralty House. We've got nice parapets around it. Mount up, rain bullets down.
It's pretty terrifying when that happens. Pushing up to just go around the corner and suddenly above you there is a rain of bullets. It's pretty terrifying. But I just want to say a huge thank you to both of you for joining today. As we did mention, Tobruk is going to be launching next Wednesday on the 2nd of March. 2nd of April even. 2nd of March, that's in the past. 2nd of April is when it will be launching. And I hope that everybody is extremely excited, as we are, to jump into the map. There is going to be a huge amount coming, not just Tobruk. There's also going to be a few changes to things like flamethrowers and precision strikes. And so be sure to look at the changelog and the patch notes when they do come out next week, to make sure that you know what is going to be happening. But I just want to say a huge thank you to both of you for joining today. A huge thank you to everybody who has joined in the chat as well. If there's anything you'd like to leave us with as we head off for our weekend, Carl and Dan?
Yeah, just like to quickly acknowledge a few members of my level design team as well who couldn't be here today. I may be the face of the team, but I can't take much credit for this map, if I'm being honest. I'd just like to thank Lucy, who couldn't be here today. She's off somewhere causing trouble, no doubt. She was the map lead for Tobruk. She worked closely with the art team. She did most of the blocking out, did a fantastic job with it. I'd also like to thank Andrew, who also couldn't be here today, unfortunately. Andrew joined us halfway through development. He jumped straight in, helped us block the map out to a great standard. You'll see the screenshot before, the Admiralty House. He did the first pass block out of that. That was fantastic, super strong. And I'd also like to shout out to Keenan as well, who was on the project at the time. He did all the research into Tobruk. He planned out most of the capture points. We'll show some of that stuff off in future dev briefs, I'm sure. Yeah, just a big thanks to my level design team and the art team who we worked with. Dan?
Yeah, absolutely. Game development is such a team effort. We work really closely with level design. We're bouncing ideas off each other all the time, and it's a really collaborative interesting process. Big shout out to the environment art team, worked incredibly hard to bring it up. As you'll see, there's a massive jump in polish between the PTE and the final result. There was a lot of hard work went into that, but hope you enjoy it. See you on the field.
Thank you very much, both. Everybody, remember, it is coming out next week. You can go rewatch the trailer. It is out on our YouTube right now. So be sure to go check that out if you want to go and rewatch and analyze what's in there. But for now, thank you so much. I cannot wait to see you in our next stream. And good luck on the battlefield next week. Thank you.